25 minutes after 9 a.m. Central African time. Welcome back. You are tuned into Salam Media News and Views. It is hosted by myself, Zaid Jadwat, standing in for Inayat Wadi this morning. Just before we move on to our next interview and conversation, of course, we're going to be speaking to Western Cape Premier Alan Winde in a bit. But just before that, linking to our previous conversation about social media etiquette, I think let me invite each of you as the listeners to engage with us on this topic and tell me uh, how much screen time do you allow your children? And of course, you can engage with us on our various social media platforms. The WhatsApp number 0617660355, and of course, you can tweet us at Salam Media. Looking forward to your responses on this very important conversation. Moving on now, Western Cape Premier Alan Winde joins us to speak about ESCOM load shedding and what his province is doing to help his citizens from load shedding. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thank you very much, and really good to be with you.
All right. Of course, the country now plunged into stage 6 load shedding indefinitely. ESCOM is seemingly working on certain maintenance at some of its plants, but there's also a number of breakdowns that have forced them to put the country under these dire conditions. And of course, this is not a new issue in South Africa. We are no stranger to load shedding. But your office has promised, or rather released a statement recently, saying that it will, your Western Cape government will now make plans to make the Western Cape more energy resilient. Tell us more about that.
So, we've had load shedding now for more than 15 years in our country. The problem is that as a province, from a constitution point of view, we don't have a role to play from energy provision. The constitution says that, the national government will supply the bulk energy supply, and then at local government level, they have a role to play with reticulation. Those rules have changed. Initially, in the last few years, there was a capability at local government level for 1 megawatt of power for households or small businesses. And then if you remember last year, they changed it again, that municipalities can actually start looking at 100 megawatts of power. Now, 100 megawatts of power, that's quite a big power station, but it starts to make a difference. In the Western Cape, for example, the city of Cape Town, they've got already a hydro plant called the Stenbos Dam, where they can run water downhill, and that generates power. That's 135 megawatts. And so how do we, as a province, what role do we play? How do we enable more? And so I set up a sort of group of internal departments in the province linked to local government. And then we also bring in advisors from outside. And I've said, well, even though the province can't play a direct role in putting up energy plants, we've got to be able to do something else. We've got to come in with a different plan. And so I've asked our team, I want to know what a 2030 and 2050 plan is for the province, where we become much more energy sustainable, energy resilient, and energy independent. We know that last year, the engagement with ESCOM, they told us that this year's load shedding is going to be worse than last year. And we know that last year was really bad, more than 3,600 hours of load shedding. Or if you take a load shedding day, we had more than 200 days of load shedding out of 365. And then they say this year is going to be worse than last year. Citizens, families, small business, big business, the economy, we cannot deal with, long-term projections. People have been saying we're going to be fixing this thing year after year after year. Well, quite frankly, we can't wait now, and we've got to go ahead and do what we can do to make sure that we set that long-term vision. But I also met yesterday with our team, and I said to them, but what I also want is I want an urgent 2023 plan. So if I look at our current plan, we've got plans where we support municipalities. They go out to tender. The city of Cape Town's already gone out for their first tender last year on 200 megawatts. They're going to go within a month for another tender, which will probably go in excess of 500 megawatts. Every time these things happen, that's a potential of mitigating 1 and 2 levels of load shedding in the city. We already know they can mitigate up to 2 levels. So that says in the next 18 months, Cape Town can probably mitigate another 2 levels of load shedding. Now, we're doing exactly the same thing with all of our municipalities, between 35 and 50 megawatts per municipality, Stellenbosch, Saldanha, Mossel Bay, George. And so we are busy working with them to go out in the next couple of months. And then we also, I think the most important is how do we facilitate and enable the private sector, because private sector is actually where the quick investment can happen. And that's from small generation on households right up to businesses generating, 50 and 100 megawatts at a time, being able to share that power, sell it back into the grid. And that's really going to be an important strategy. For example, a business the other day that I visited put solar panels on the piece of land next to where their company is. And once they got approval, it took them 6 weeks to be energy resilient. And so how do we make sure that this is a big focus on energy resilience and investment into energy as quickly as possible this year, because we know it's going to get worse. And it's a dire situation. It's like a crisis. I wish the national government would call it a disaster, because it actually makes it easier to manage. We will be actually requesting again for that disaster coming up. But that's part of the program that our team is busy working on.
Yes, of course. And I think just before we move on, you recently hosted the first meeting of the newly established Energy Council. And that's, of course, against the backdrop of stage 6 load shedding. Talk to us about their priorities and any challenges that you foresee in fulfilling these priorities.
So the first item for discussion is, what does the structure look like? Have we got it correct? Because the structure is made up of different government departments. And I think we need to definitely add more private sector players. Of course, we've got to be careful. You can't have private sector involved in government where there's procurement. But there are definite private sector players who are not going to be supplying energy, but are able to comment. For example, many of our professors at our universities who are really experts in this. How do we get that expertise in the room as well? I myself have just procured and employ one such expert, Mr. Alvi Lester, who we have now brought in and is actually the lead in this team. He has run the Western Cape Eskom operations for 20 years and has been really involved and understands Eskom itself, understands the grid systems, understands energy. So we've got that kind of expert already in the team. We've also got many officials that have been working on this for a number of years, enabling local authorities. Our small-scale embedded generation, 135 megawatts already, more than 3,000 small independent power producers already in the system. What we do know is that in that market, South Africa is already number 6 in the world. This is people that are buying inverters, battery systems, and solar systems. So already a lot of private sector money going in there. But how do we ramp that up to bigger megawatts? And that's what this team is going to be doing. So we had our first meeting yesterday, and we need to make sure that we've got weekly feedbacks. And we will keep the public informed as to what those choices are, what we will be doing to enable both government and private sector in this province to reach not only our current targets, but make sure that 2023 got urgency, and then a much sort of more robust long-term 2030 and 2050 plan.
Of course, and I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned earlier on about the dire situation of load shedding in South Africa. Of course, it's quite a crippling situation playing out in our country, and something that we've had to contend with for many years. And there seems to be quite slow progress in regards to addressing this. And there are, of course, as you mentioned earlier on, calls for a state of emergency, a disaster rather, with regards to dealing with this. However, with that, there are also concerns about this possibly, should this eventually materialize, the possibility of corruption then hampering those efforts. Your response to this, Premier?
I think it's definitely not possibility. I mean, it's actually it's part of the problem of why we are where we are. I mean, it's known that there is corruption, that the systems are captured, that the coal supply is captured and held to ransom. Power station by power station seems to be, there seems to be extortion across the value chain. The ESCOM board and the CEO mention this regularly. We've got some of the installations where you've got military protecting our power plants, and they still don't seem to be able to stop, the sabotage and the corruption. So I definitely think that corruption is probably bad management and corruption. Those are the two things that are the cause as to why we are in the situation that we are in. And quite frankly, now as a province, you keep on hearing it year after year. Don't worry, this year we will fix this and this and this, and this is the plan. And, we've heard this from a State of the Nation address to different ministers being put in charge of different programs over the last few years, with all sorts of promises that, in the next few months we will get to, a resilient and energy secure. Well, quite frankly, that doesn't happen, and it's got worse and worse and worse. So, they're not addressing the corruption, and that's why we had to make that statement to our team yesterday to say, you need to go out, you need to make sure that even though it's not really a provincial mandate, I want a plan for this province that says, energy resilience, as much independent private sector investment into this space as possible. What's the 2030 and 2050 plan? And then what is the urgency? What is going to happen now in this year to mitigate this risk? Because if we don't mitigate it, the job losses are going to be astronomical. If you just speak to business at the moment, and it's across the board, big business can't manage and can't cope. Some of these businesses can't even open their doors at level 4 to level 6 because they can't even get the machinery started up, let alone getting it to run, because then they've got to close it down again. And then even more so is the small and medium-sized businesses who just don't have the capital to invest, millions and millions into energy resilience. And even those that have managed to do it, their diesel bill every month is making them non-competitive. They cannot survive with these kind of cost increases. And then, of course, add to that the 18.6% NERSA increase that went out yesterday. These are all just layers upon layers. I mean, the NERSA increase is going to bring hundreds of billions into the coffers of ESCOM, but what percentage of that, again, is going to be pilfered, is going to be subject to corruption, theft, and not going to go into fixing the system, because they're not fixing the management. They're not fixing it, the basis of getting our system operational. So we've got to make sure that we've got plans in place that mitigate all of those risks, because I don't trust those announcements and that system any longer.
All right, and I'm just looking at a tweet here from @KoisanWomen, and it says, can we just start planning a protest speaking out against this load shedding? Like, I'm really hurtful now, stage 6, anybody in the Cape Town area that wants to join me, I'm planning it. So I think South Africans are fed up. We've known this for quite a while, but just quickly, do you think as South Africans, we've allowed this situation to deteriorate unchecked, without planning any mass action, without really taking any firm action against this continued energy crisis and demanding immediate change?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and it's not as, and I'm not going to use my own, thinking here. I'm going to paraphrase a comment that was made to me in an international visit the other day. The Vice Chancellor of Germany, the Deputy President of Germany, came to visit us in South Africa. He came to Cape Town, and then he went to Tshwane. When he came here, we had the opportunity to show him around the Western Cape of it, and then we had a lunch. And at the lunch, we were talking about load shedding, because he was saying, obviously, they've got energy crises happening in Europe right now because of the Ukraine-Russia war. It is causing a big problem for energy supply. But in Germany, they put gasification systems in place. It took them 192 days. From the start of the war, 192 days later, they've got a full gasification system built to mitigate the 17% risk of loss of gas into their system. And 192 days later, they have a solution. I said to him, well, this thing's been going on. I mean, we've had promises from leadership and promises from Eskom for 15 years. His comment to me was, and the South Africans are not in the streets? I can't believe it. And I think that's the point. I mean, I think, we'll get an announcement that says we're going back to load shedding level 2, and everybody's going to go, oh, great, that's excellent. Well, no, it's not. How do we create business confidence in an investment climate? This has to be fixed. The biggest problem is, if we all go to the streets and we all scream and shout, at the end of the day, it's still going to be an 18-month fix, but there must be urgency in the system. I don't see that urgency. You can feel the urgency if you go to those countries that are actually under energy shortfall in the northern hemisphere. You feel an urgency every day. I said the Germans did it in 192 days. The Dutch did it in 160 days. And we're doing it in 15 years, and we still haven't done it. And that's the problem in South Africa. Where's the urgency? Where's the management? Where's the leadership? And it's all being held captive by corruption.
Yes, of course. And I think we're just going to have to wait out and see how this progresses. Of course, the energy experts warning that obviously something we've already really figured out is that load shedding is here to stay, at least for this year. It's one of the main concerns and threats to South Africans this year for 2023. And energy experts warning that it might even go as far as stage 7. But we are hoping that we'll get some sort of intervention, as we've been hoping for quite a while now. But thank you so much for your time, Premier Alan Winde, and hope you have an amazing day further.
Thank you very much, and you too. And, if anybody's got great ideas, we need to crowdsource them. We need to make sure that we stand together to fix this problem, because, it is holding back everything in our country. Nothing is going to be left untouched if this is sort of maintained at level 6 and 7. I mean, it's just a disaster. But thank you very much, and have a great day.
All right, that was Premier Alan Winde, Western Cape Premier, speaking to us about his provincial government's plans to tackle load shedding. That, of course, against the backdrop of stage 6 load shedding in South Africa. Please do stay tuned.